records videos at home, and she posts them online, and then people pay to watch the videos.
Melanie Duncan is a serial entrepreneur that, along with her business partner and husband Devin, has been experiencing success since college. While studying, they started Custom Greek Apparel, an online store offering sorority and fraternity members apparel with customized colors, fabrics, and embroidery. Then they launched Luxury Monograms, offering custom monogrammed home decor items. Soon their products were being featured in magazines and on Good Morning America and The Nate Berkus Show, and many more. When her businesses were well-oiled machines, she decided to jump into the online education space, offering classes and support for makers and small business owners selling physical products. Now she has had over 160,000 students go through her training programs, and she's consulted on digital strategy for major corporations and spoken on stages all over the world. I caught up with her recently in New York City to ask her what she believes led to her massive success and what other makers and online entrepreneurs can do to follow in her very stylish shoes. I hope you enjoy this interview, and I'm sorry about the audio on this one, guys. Both of our lapel mics failed, so I did what I can, but definitely listen to it anyway because she gives some amazing practical tips. But thank you so much for letting us come into your beautiful home today.
It is a pleasure. I'm happy to have you here.
I'm really excited about this interview because a lot of the online influencers, people with big personal brands that I've interviewed, don't sell, or they haven't started with physical products. They didn't start with, brick and mortar or actual production, and you did.
Yes.
So that's really something refreshing and interesting for people watching who might be makers.
Right.
They have handmade goods or physical products. So as always, I like to go back to the beginning and start at the very beginning of your journey. You were in college.
Yes.
I love this story, you guys. I was in a sorority, but you weren't, right?
Nope.
So KKG, what? And your now husband's sister comes home on break with this sweatshirt. This is so true. You asked her, how much did you pay for that sweatshirt? And it was like a cheap sweatshirt with 2 little letters embroidered on it, and she had spent $75. And you guys, being entrepreneurs, were like, ding! So what happened from there? You guys see that, you're like, this is an opportunity. What did you do next?
Yes, so that particular journey has had a lot of different iterations.
Okay.
And so when we originally saw the margin for profit and we started talking to, so I guess our first step would have been market research. So we started talking to our other friends on campus in our school that were part of the Greek organization, because neither of us were.
Right.
And we started trying to identify what were the main obstacles when it came to buying Greek apparel. So a lot of people lived on campus that didn't have a car, and we had no Greek store. I know larger universities do, but the school we went to did not have a Greek store. So people would have to go off campus, get a ride, do something which isn't the easiest thing,
Right.
and try and find a place to go order these custom sweatshirts. So usually they would end up going to some mom and pop quilt shop someplace. They'd have to bring in the actual garment they wanted. There were all of these hurdles that they had to jump over just to actually purchase what they wanted.
Right.
So we originally, for a lot of reasons, turned to the internet because of 2 things: the scale of who we could serve, but also for our own personal lifestyle, we liked the fact that we could be selling even while we were sleeping.
Right.
Which now is, such an obvious thing, but 10, 11 years ago, the obvious thing was to open a brick and mortar location, and we did the opposite, which was, let's start online, let's give people an easy way to still order really cool Greek stuff, while still giving us the opportunity to do it while we were in classes, or if we wanted to go out on a Friday night, we could still be taking orders.
But let's talk about that, because then things start to grow, and you're still students. I mean, you were still a full-time student. So what was it like what was that like back then, building that business while still in school?
Yes, so we had a couple different partners we were working with. The original idea, as a lot of people can probably relate to if they are currently in a business or starting a business, is that original idea evolves. So not a lot of people know this, but when we first started Custom Greek Threads, the idea was that we were going to do screen printed apparel, which is like the t-shirts for the different parties. But we did competitive research, and there actually wasn't a lot of markup in that, and there was a ton of competition. So we decided to niche back even more. Greek apparel in itself is already a pretty small niche in the customized apparel world, but we went even more specific and decided to focus just on embroidery, because embroidery items are, in terms of like embroidered tote bags, t-shirts, all sorts of stuff, sweatshirts, it's much more expensive than screen printing, and there weren't as many people offering it because there's a higher barrier of entry. The equipment is more expensive, it's a little bit harder to produce than screen printing, so that was where we started. We started with screen printing, that didn't go over well, then we focused specifically on embroidery, and you were asking what that looked like managing it with school. Well, there were peaks and valleys. I actually think that starting a business in college, I know a lot of people watching, that boat has probably sailed, you're not in college anymore, but I really do credit that to being one of the biggest advantages, because we had a lot of free time.
That's true.
And to be completely honest, if you asked me to start a business right now with a baby and a life and a husband and family and in-laws and, just my life in my 30s is very different than my life in my 20s. I was blessed enough in my 20s, my parents were supporting me. So they were paying for my apartment. I didn't have to worry about, actually covering costs of my basic living expenses. So that gave me a lot of freedom. And I did also work part-time at another job, but it gave me a lot of freedom and flexibility to put towards growing and scaling a business. So to answer it specifically, it wasn't, I don't remember time being a huge issue, which I know is probably one of the most common things people struggle with now. But, schoolwork was manageable. I guess what would be honest is I did not have a huge social life in college.
Oh, okay.
I was not in a sorority, and I was dating Devin, and we were working on the business, and I don't remember it being like a terrible time of strife.
Right.
But no, I was definitely not like going to parties every weekend, and I was working. And I loved it. And again, it didn't feel like a huge sacrifice because I was learning so much and doing so many things. But yeah, I would, like a normal day back then, I would wake up, go to class for the first half of the day. I'd come into our offices were just about 15 minutes off campus. So I would normally go, pick up lunch for myself, for Devin, for some of our friends that were working there, come back, answer some emails. I was doing a lot of our marketing and event coordination at that point.
Okay.
And then I think I had a period or two off, and then I would go back to school for 1 or 2 more classes, then I'd come back to the office after work for a couple hours, and then we'd go home and kind of work on some other things and brainstorming on projects afterward. So It was a lot of work, but it was definitely an exciting time.
But I think that's a lesson for any college kids who are watching, that if you want to launch a business that, like hers, eventually went on to be a 7-figure business, probably gonna have to go through social life.
Yeah.
But so I want to know, like, when did you know, okay, this is really gonna work, this is gonna take off? Because a lot of people have ideas in college, or even just when you're young and you're working on it, maybe you have a little bit of momentum. When could you see, okay, this is worth going all in, instead of like getting a job after graduation?
Right. Yeah, I remember because I majored in psychology.
Okay.
And it was a very clinical-based program. And I would always twist all of my papers and my research studies to be around business and marketing and like consumer psychology. And pretty much everyone in my graduating class in my major was going on to do some sort of graduate program, or they really weren't sure what they were going to do. And I was the only one that was like, no, I'm going off and I'm going to work for myself. And that was so weird in that particular major to be able to graduate and do that.
Yeah.
But we'd started that company when I was a sophomore, so I'd been doing it for multiple years. That being said, I wouldn't say that I actually knew for sure the business was going to be a success until the year after I graduated.
Okay.
So we had, I got plenty of stories for you, but we had a lot of ups and downs. And after graduation, we actually moved the whole company to Dallas, Texas. We packed the whole thing up in a U-Haul. My husband drove a U-Haul truck that had like all of our fabrics, all of our samples, some of our inventory. We don't have a lot of inventory because it's custom. But I drove our Volvo SUV, and it had our one embroidery machine in the back seat. So I was actually driving this, and I thought, oh my gosh, I can't crash or like let anything happen to it. I think we stopped once or twice at hotels, and we just woke up every morning like, I hope our cars haven't been broken into. But we had our original partners leave the business, decided it wasn't a viable thing for them just because they weren't seeing the success, and there was a lot of obstacles we had to overcome. That, you know, even if you have a great idea, doesn't mean it's going to be easy to turn it into a successful business.
Right.
But I will answer your question. I knew it was successful when we stopped doing in-person marketing.
Like trade shows.
Stopped doing trade shows, stopped going to different, we would go to Panhellenic events, so we would go to like a Delta Gamma conference, or we would, you know, advertise at UCLA or do something like that. We stopped that, and one day we got an order from, I can't remember the exact school, but it was outside of Washington, D.C. And I looked at Devin, my husband, and neither one of us, we hadn't done any advertising there, we hadn't done anything in Washington, D.C., but we had just started using SEO. And we had a form where you could say, how did you hear about us, which a lot of people have, and it was from online search. So we were starting, that was our first order that we know specifically came from just online advertising. And once we knew that would work, we knew that the business was going to be successful.
Awesome. So another challenge you had was the seasonality of that business.
Yes.
And I love what you did, which was you figured out a way to expand on what you already had to make a year-round business, which is what your monogram business, or luxury monograms, which is home goods, decor. So kind of talk about how maybe someone out there who has, you know, a seasonal business and they're struggling with the feast and famine, how did you fix that?
Seasonal businesses are really hard. Because, I mean, it depends specifically on the type of business, but for a physical goods business and an actual manufacturing business, we would have to ramp up employees for a holiday period, or for us, it was really busy in the fall around the holidays, but then summers were very, very slow. So the overhead of the office wasn't a big deal. As I said, we don't stock a lot of inventory, so that was fine, but it was the actual staffing. Because you hire these people and they have to be trained to do embroidery and cut and sew and all these very specific skills that not everyone just knows how to do that type of thing. And then, you know, essentially let them go, even with the expectation. And even if they knew they were just hired for Christmas, you're still then losing. If you bring on these people, you spend 3 to 4 weeks training them. And then, you know, they work for you, then they're gone, they go to other jobs. They're not going to come back every year. It's very uncommon for that.
Yeah.
So we tried to look into a lot of different things. One of the ideas I had that didn't pan out was we're looking at the souvenir market. So if you go to any big city like, you know, LA or New York, you see tons and tons of NYC swag.
Right.
T-shirts, tote bags, all of that. So we originally tried to go into that market, but it just didn't pan out because of we really like selling direct to customers, and there wasn't the same ability to do that. But Luxury Monograms was created in order to stabilize the amount of business that was created, and that business particularly, we did a lot of marketing as gifts for weddings or bridal showers, even baby showers, mostly wedding, but weddings tend to be very popular right around the same time as custom Greek threads demand was a lot lower.
Yeah, summers. How did you go from like this one pillow that we're going to test and a few bloggers to being on Good Morning America?
Yeah.
Coming up, don't miss her #1 piece of advice for success. But first, I want to tell you about something really cool, especially if you're a freelancer, if you have a service-based business, maybe you're trying to grow a side hustle, and you got a lot of invoices going out and hopefully a lot of money coming in, right? If you're having trouble keeping all of that organized, maybe not doing the best job keeping track of your time and keeping track of all the taxes information, you've got to check out the FreshBooks Cloud Accounting app, okay? It is going to make things so much easier for you. You can go right now, it takes 30 seconds to set it up, and immediately start sending invoices with your logo on it, with your colors, they're professional looking, no more clunky Word documents, okay? Plus, you can go in and use the time tracker app and immediately start a task and associate that time to a specific client. And then you don't have to have that awkward conversation when your clients forget to pay you, because the app has automatic email follow-up that will remind people that their invoice is past due. You can immediately log in and look at your dashboard and know what money's coming in, what money's going out. You can easily sync your expenses if you use a particular credit card for your business. business account, you can just import that in and it will automatically categorize your expenses for you. You guys are going to love this, and FreshBooks is offering my viewers a free 30-day trial. So go to freshbooks.com/pursuit and make sure when it pops up and says, how did you hear about us, that you put in the pursuit, and you will get a free 30-day trial, and you can try it out for yourself. You have a lot of invoices, you have a lot of variables, you have a lot of things going on in your business because you're growing and you're hustling, which is awesome, but you're not so awesome with the organization. You have got to try it out. Again, that's freshbooks.com/pursuit. I also wanted to remind you guys about the 3 best ways to support this free show on the internet, okay? And number 1 is you can share this video. Share it with a hustler you know will like it. Share it with your social media followers. That would be awesome. Number 2, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel. That always helps. And number 3, most important, you can sign up for our monthly email list. And when you do, you're going to get a free copy of this month's Pursuit magazine, which comes out every month. It's totally free, and it takes you behind the scenes of every single interview. It answers questions like, how did you get that interview? What were they like in person? All that kind of fun stuff. Plus, we have topical articles for each month, like goal setting and productivity and marketing and branding. So don't miss out. Again, it's totally free. It's only once a month. This is at thepursuit.tv/magazine. Now, let's get back into the show. How did you go from like this one pillow that we're going to test and a few bloggers to being on Good Morning America?
Yeah, and that's a really important thing to talk about too for people that are just getting started. Something my husband and I always say, whether it's a big idea or something more manageable, we try and ask ourselves, what would this look like if it were easy? I think so many people, they get an idea for something, but their minimum viable product or their minimum viable service, whatever it is not really that minimum. Like, they go so in depth, they think, oh, well, I want to do a handbag line, so I've got to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars of capital, and I've got to get this sample made overseas and all this stuff. And it's like, no, you probably don't have to do that much to test the actual idea.
Right.
So with luxury monograms, I originally, I'm trying to remember specifically how it went down, but I originally, I have a lot of friends in PR here in New York, and so I called them up and I said, okay, how do I make a press kit? Like, I want to get magazines, I want to do this. I feel like that's what I'm supposed to do, because that's what everyone tells you you're supposed to do.
Get major press.
And so I created these beautiful press kits, and I spent, weeks trying to find all the press contacts at different publications, trying to get connections from people, and heard nothing. Like, just fell totally flat, and I was so frustrated. And so I was like, okay, well, that's not working. What existing relationships do I have that could make some sort of ripple in the marketplace? And I thought, well, I previously had a lifestyle blog. It was mildly successful at best. It was not a huge lifestyle blog, but what I did have was relationships with other bloggers that had blogs that were successful, just from commenting and being a reader of theirs and that sort of thing. So I thought, well, I'll do some sort of giveaway where I really want to make sure I can reach out to these people and make sure I'm creating value for them and for their readers. And this is something that I think everyone needs to be reminded of, is I didn't go in with the motive of, hey, I want you to sell my pillows. Can you write a blog post on it? I thought, okay, I know these bloggers. I've gone to lunch with them, had drinks with them. I know that they get really tired of creating content. Like, they run out of ideas. It's a lot of work. At this point, a lot of them were doing posts every single day. So like, they were just, trying to create so much content. So I thought, okay, so what I'll do is I'll write an actual blog post up for them, and I wrote a custom post for each person. A lot of times they didn't use all of it, or they used part of it, but I thought, what would this look like if it were easy for them to do? Yeah. And then I thought, what would be, and I made sure when I wrote the letter, a lot of them I did have, I'd met them, not, BFFs or anything, but maybe I met them at an event in New York, something, so I tried to anchor how we had met, who we knew in common. I would say something specific that I knew about them or about their readers. Just, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but it's just so important that things feel personal and that you really do your due diligence. So that was something I did specifically, and then I made sure to, of course, say, let's do something where you can offer one of your readers, we'll do a raffle, and, they can get a free pillow so that it made them look good to their audience. Right. And it is easy now, because you see this so much, but back then, this was 5 or 6 years ago, it wasn't as common to see blog giveaways, and there weren't as many product-based owners bombarding bloggers with things. So it was a little bit easier to do at scale. But I really do think that the reason it was successful was because I went above and beyond and tried to think, how can I make this easy for them? How can I make sure I'm making them look good to their audience? That this is something, it's not just asking them to do a favor for me, but essentially I'm almost in a way doing a favor for them.
Right.
And then the way that all spiraled or snowballed into Good Morning America and we got a lot of crazy invitations for things, was because I realized that the producers and a lot of the people that were looking for product placement and that sort of thing were looking for ideas, and they were looking online to relevant blogs and tastemakers in different industries to tell them what they should put on their show.
So it was actually blog first, then TV.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that's great.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because you talk a little bit about connections, and you've said here in New York a few times. So I wanted to know, did you move here strategically for your business, like for your professionally, or just because you love New York?
I moved to New York because I knew that living here would turn me into the person I wanted to grow into.
Oh, please expand.
Yes. So at the time we started our businesses, we were living in Southern California, went to Chapman University, and we just were not surrounded by the type of people. We had wonderful friends, very sweet people, but just not people that were really trying to make an impact, trying to do things, that were wildly ambitious in the same way that we were and that we are. Yeah. And I had a friend that moved out to New York, and I came and stayed with her, and I knew within like 30 minutes, I'm like, this is where I have to be. And it's so cliche, because I mean, almost anyone that has moved to New York will tell you this, and they'll talk about the energy, and it's so cliche, but it's also totally true.
Yeah, my videographer knows that I basically asked you this question so that my husband would see the answer, and then he would be forced for us to move here, because I feel this, it's just a different energy, different. I think, you know, but I wondered, because you had never said if you'd really moved for that reason. I want to talk a little bit about you and your husband before we move on to your other businesses, because as I said in the email I sent over to you, I think you guys might be shiny unicorns in that you're just so rare that you can, you know, you started at like 21 and he was, what, 23 or somewhere in there, and you've been in business together that entire time.
Yeah.
So you may not be able to give, I mean, I feel like in some ways you may not be able to help people who are just not compatible to do that, because some husband and wives aren't. But maybe a husband and wife team who's gotten started and they've been working for a while and they're frustrated or about to kill each other, or their roles are not working. What advice do you have for them?
And this is just purely advice for how Devin and I work together, but we have to have very separate and very clear roles and responsibilities in any business we work in. And pretty much the only time there's ever conflict between us, which is surprisingly rare, is if I start telling him how to do his job or he starts telling me how to do mine. Like we work in businesses together, but on very different things. And we brainstorm together, but there also needs to be a clear dominant position. So what I mean by that is, you know, Devin works with me in my business, he works with Amy Porterfield, he works with a lot of people in their businesses. When Devin and I are brainstorming about my business specifically, I get to say yes or no. Because he's helping me in a systems and a support role, and he has phenomenal ideas, but at the end of the day, it's my business and my brand.
Okay.
Now there's other projects that we work on together where he has a more dominant position, or he has more expertise or more subject matter or more skin in the game, and I will come and consult on it. But he's there's a clear person who gets to say yay or nay, and I find that's important.
Yeah.
That if you're working in a business where you're totally joint, I would just say, be very clear on like, okay, who's doing social media? Who's doing finances? Who's doing whatever it is? And that person, the worst thing you can have in a business or in any situation is a diffusion of responsibility. Okay. So the same thing goes if you're working in a business with your partner and you're kind of working on everything together, you're working on nothing. Like you need to have your particular areas, own those, and then I have complete and utter confidence that the things that Devin manages, he manages way better than I ever could. So there's no second guessing, there's no meddling in that sort of a way, and as long as you have that respect for each other in those positions, I find it's pretty manageable.
How do you keep from becoming like all work all the time crazy people? Because you're both in businesses and you both can work from home, work from wherever.
Yeah,
How do you unplug, I guess?
I think for a long time we were all work all the time and had no problem with it. Like it's really funny. A lot of people do ask that. You know, how do you like make sure you don't talk about work at dinner? I'm like, 9 times out of 10 we do talk about work at dinner. The one thing I will say is that if one of us is just not in the mood, which is again pretty rare, to talk about business at dinner, we'll just say like, no, I'm just, I'm tired, or I'm maxed today, I don't want to talk about this. Yeah. And the other person's like, okay, cool, no problem. Like we never press each other. That's been made known. I will say that now that we have a daughter, it's different.
Just about to ask.
This whole other thing now that, this whole other love. Our businesses were our babies for so long. So we wanted to talk about them at dinner, and we would travel a ton, but still work a lot while we were traveling. But now there definitely is more of a need for like time that we unplug and we're just with her.
Be present,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
So has that changed your plan, your vision?
No, nothing. It's all the same.
Really? I was like, oh, maybe you planned ahead for it. And also, did you plan ahead like from a logistics standpoint, like with your business, having a baby when you're running all these businesses? So maybe just kind of talk about all of that.
I did plan, and we like one of the things I'm always very open about is we have an amazing full-time live-in nanny. Okay. So a lot of times, moms will reach out to me currently and they're like, how are you still doing all the things you're doing and like doing date nights? I'm like, we have live-in help. Don't feel bad if like your life doesn't look like mine from the outside, because there's no way that I'd be able to get up and work out every morning and do the things I do if I was taking care of Olivia 24/7. So that's like my big disclaimer to moms, because I think sometimes they look on social media and they're like, I just don't get it. Like, how is she doing all this stuff? And
do you ever have mom guilt about that?
No.
Really?
I don't.
Get it, sister.
No.
I'm still evolving. I'm still trying to get there.
I think motherhood is about choices, and like one of the great things about having our nanny is there's a lot more that goes into taking care of a child than just the one-on-one FaceTime with them. In terms of making her food, washing her dishes, doing her laundry, taking her trash out, like running errands for her, there's so much stuff that she needs. A lot of times our nanny will do all of that so that I can stay and play with Olivia. Or I can read to her. Like she doesn't care if I'm the one that's mashing up her sweet potatoes. She cares that I'm the one that's sitting across from her at dinner, fully engaged and present, not stressed, not exhausted.
Yeah.
That's what's important. But I think entrepreneurship, particularly when you are a mom, is a vehicle for choices. It's getting to choose, what does being a mom and a business owner look like to you? And there should be absolutely no right or wrong way. Whether that means that you're working, when your kids are taking naps so that you never have to be away from them for a second. If that's your dream, go for it. But I also think, I'm really excited for my daughter, the example I get to set for her. And, she's 10 months old, so she has very little recollection of what I'm actually telling her. But I think it's really cool that when I'm working, I get to tell her I'm working on stuff that's helping other moms do cool stuff for their families and their kids. And, if that means that I miss one of her snack times, I don't feel guilty about that.
When I get home from a trip, she'll say, did you help people? Because my husband says, Mommy's gone, she's helping people.
Oh, so cute.
Just so sweet. So this kind of ties into sort of what your life is like now, because you mentioned that you're helping other moms. Now you have your online business, you have information products where you're helping other entrepreneurs with physical products or with their online presence, which I think a lot of people think, oh, she's gotten to the point where now she has passive income business. And, your other businesses are kind of running on their own.
Right.
So how passive is it now at the point that you're at, and kind of what's an average day or week like for you now?
And I do also want to circle back to what you were saying about planning.
Yes.
It's very funny. I was going through a really big growth trajectory in my personal brand business right before I got pregnant with Olivia.
Okay.
And my husband and I had made the decision we wanted to start a family. We thought, okay, so we did a big round of hiring. We thought, okay, it'll probably take, a while to get pregnant. So we'll get these people. We just hired like 5 new people. We're just going to start onboarding them. And I got pregnant really fast, which is a huge blessing. And, I know how awesome that is. But I was super sick my whole first trimester. And we weren't telling people yet. So I had all of these new people I had just hired that wanted to be onboarded, wanted to get on Skype calls and do all this. And I was just like, no, just send me a Google Doc or something. I couldn't even, the idea of being on a Skype call, I thought I was going to throw up. So it totally backfired in that way where I thought I was planning, but it all turned out okay. They hung with me for 3 months, and then I was doing better my second trimester and able to actually properly onboard them, get them set so that when I had Olivia, I had more support in place. But that's, you can only plan to a certain extent.
Right.
Life is going to throw at you what it's going to throw at you. But I will say that hiring the right people and putting them in the right positions is huge.
How do you find the right people?
It is a very, I could do like a 2-hour interview with you on that particular thing. But what it comes down to is I don't look at applications. References are good, but any sort of hiring I do, it's all project-based.
Okay.
So I do like a project funnel hiring process where I usually start with anywhere from 100 to 75 candidates. Then based upon different psychological trigger questions and things that I kind of get into, I usually select 25 or so candidates to do a sample project based upon the type of work they're going to be doing with me. And then I just continually weed out through a series of projects, but I find that to be really important. I still think it's crazy if you're hiring anyone, test out having them do what you're actually hiring them to do. Like when you hear it, it's like, oh, of course, but so many people are like, I just saw an application or my friend recommended this person to me. Doesn't mean that they're going to work with you in a way that's compatible. So we do a big trial process, then we do a 60-day trial period. So that's why I had all these new people, because I just spent 6 months going through hiring processes. But that's how you get the right people, is you front load so much work that by the time they're in the position, it's like it's a no-brainer.
That is great advice. And something I haven't heard before of like how you did that. So thank you for sharing the details. That's awesome. So go back. So now, what's an average day like, or a week? How much time are you spending on each business, and how are you managing those people? You have multiple businesses, multiple staff. So what's it like for you?
Yeah, it's definitely changing. It's been a year of transition with having my daughter. So now I still have my personal brand. And I have an amazing program called Business Class, which is my flagship monthly membership community. But that's really the only thing I'm focusing on. I used to do lots of standalone products, like I had my Pinterest program, and I had a program on building your email list and all these different things. And after I had Olivia, I thought a couple things. I had a few epiphanies. but I thought anytime I'm working, it's really important because it's now time that I'm away from her. So the work needs to be high impact. Before I had her, I loved doing work just to do work because I enjoyed the processes. I always learned new things. So I wasn't as selective as I should have been about the projects, or as selective as I needed to be. I don't really have any regrets about it. I learned a ton. But after having Olivia, I thought, okay, I definitely want to work less, because I was working a lot before her just because that's what I wanted to do.
You could.
But now that I had her, and we're looking at having more children, I kind of realized my bandwidth now is there's competition for where my time goes. So I looked at all of my programs and I decided I want to focus on my membership community. This is where I really think I can make my mark. And what I'm doing now is Deva and I started an accelerator company, which I know we were talking to kind of circle back about, but we work with a select number, like a very select number of other business owners. And instead of actually coaching or doing a mastermind, we take a percentage of their business and basically become like an advisory board for them.
Okay, gotcha. So that's his partnership with Amy Porterfield kind of falls into that sort of...
It does. With Amy, that happened before we formed this accelerator, so it's different. And Devin does work very much in Amy's business, where these accelerator companies are companies that we talk with maybe once a week. So it's a little different level of involvement.
Interesting. You're not from, New York. You're from Portland, right? You said, and your parents, your family, they're not entrepreneurial. At any point were they like, what are you crazy kids doing? And then now, what do they think? And how did you connect with someone like Amy? Like, where did you find that community?
So my parents originally, I think they were a little nervous. I mean, I was my early 20s when we got started. So I think they were like, okay, she's young, she's experimenting. My mom always wanted me to go and get a doctorate. I don't know why. That was just like kind of one of her things. I think she thought I was going to get my doctorate in psychology. So when I didn't, she was like, oh, are you sure? I'm like, oh no, trust me, I just did 4 years of college, I'm sure. But they were always very supportive. And then when they kind of, and this has been an evolution of a decade, and as we started to become like more and more successful, and particularly got more into the online sphere and like really started to scale very quickly with revenue, I think they were just like, oh my gosh, these kids must be drug dealers or something. I don't know,
What exactly do you guys do?
Yes. Deb and I have this joke that my mom used to try to explain to people what I did in terms of my online personal brand, and she'd say, oh, well, I don't think she actually said this is just our joke. Oh, well, my daughter records videos at home, and she posts them online, and then people pay to watch the videos. So it's a little strange. But no, I mean, they've been awesome. They definitely still, I think, sometimes don't have any idea what we do, but my mom will watch my webinars. My dad signed up for my email list for a while. I think he thought I was writing the emails to him personally, which is a little confusing.
So great.
Yeah, they're super sweet, and they're very proud of us.
But you have a community of support. I mean, Amy's one of your good friends, and we were talking off camera. You were at a dinner where Ramit Sethi, who I just had on the show.
Yeah.
So how did you connect with those people?
Well, I have kind of a weird strategy, actually. So I love to entertain at home.
Okay.
I love to do dinner parties. I don't know where that came from, but it's a big part of something I've always enjoyed doing. So when we first moved to New York, I was really set on building a community, a network of people for us here. So I would meet people, it sounds so weird to say out loud, but I would meet people like at a networking event, or like, Derek actually is one of our very good friends, Derek Halpern. He lives 3 floors down, just in case you guys want to stop by.
Tell him to come on the show, because I haven't heard back from him yet.
Yeah, so he's 3 floors down. But I think I was at an event he threw in New York, and that's the thing about New York, like there's just so much stuff going on that you just kind of bump into people. But anyways, I think I met Derek, and there was another person that I met at another conference that lived in the city, and when we first moved here, we lived in this tiny, tiny little apartment, but it had this awesome rooftop deck.
Okay.
And so I would put together like barbecues or cocktail hours, and I would invite a ton of people, and I'd try and think of, again, it's funny, I'm kind of seeing the trends here, but I would try to put together a group of people that I knew would have mutually beneficial connections. So I would try and think of who I knew that knew someone. I'd have people bring a friend, but I would try to create these parties. They weren't really, they were usually around 10, 15 people, but these dinner parties or these cocktail parties where I could be a connector for people. And also, like it was an awesome rooftop, so people would come and there'd be like this nice spread of food, and people, I met people that way, and there's a very different connection when you host people and you have them over to your home versus like, hey, let's go get coffee, which is great, but it's different to invite someone like, hey, why don't you come to our apartment, we're having a dinner party.
Right.
So that's how I met a lot of people, is I actually would put together different things at my home or on our rooftop, and have a friend bring someone that maybe I was interested in meeting, or have them bring someone that I knew would be interesting to someone else at the party for a connection. And it's very easy to do in New York. I don't know that this would work necessarily in every city,
right?
But here, that was a great way to get plugged into a community of just awesome people. But I also, the caveat to that, or I guess the little asterisk would be, I also think it's very important that you bring something to the table. So I was very intimidated a lot of times about the people that would be coming and that were a lot more successful than myself. But I was trying to make sure that I was doing really cool stuff in my own life. So when people asked me, hey, what do you do? It wasn't like, oh, I'm working on an idea for something. But Deb and I were always, really pushing and trying to do cool stuff and try new projects and collaborations, so that people are going to judge you in an instant.
Right.
And you have to have something really cool to say, or, I would try and think of, I knew I was going to talk to someone that I didn't have a lot of a relationship with yet, but I knew them, or I was on their email list, or I read their blog, or whatever it was. I love reading, and so I would think of, like, what's a really cool book that I've read lately that I think they would like? And I'd be like, oh, I love people love flattery, so I'd like say something, I love that last, blog post or whatever that you sent out. I wanted to let you know there's this cool book. So again, just like adding value, whether it's through connections or recommendations or resources, that's such a great foundational layer of a relationship.
Awesome. And I definitely think that could work on a local level for people who are
Yeah.
trying to do something locally. So kind of in keeping with relationships, what about mentors? And actually I'm going to interview Todd tomorrow, and I know he has worked with you in a coaching. So how about people who have helped you in that way throughout your career?
Yeah, so Todd actually came over. It's funny, I met Todd at that same event with Derek Halpern, and they lived on the Upper West Side, which is where we live now, and we lived then. And so I'm like, oh, I knew that I had to connect Devin and Todd, but Devin wasn't with me at that event. So I'm like, oh, you should come over, we'll do a barbecue. And the whole time I was like trying to put Devin and Todd together because I just knew they would, and now they're business partners. So I take all the credit for everything, basically.
But he coached you, right? Like he came on as sort of a mentor, or
he started with Devin actually.
Oh, okay.
So he started with Devin in more of a just like as an entrepreneurial coach, and just how Devin performs in all the many different businesses. So they did some calls, but I don't think Todd does this anymore. But how his coaching practice used to work is before you started on these monthly calls with him, you had to do a full day session. And the session, I don't think I'm allowed to say numbers, but it was really expensive. And so Devin told me about like, hey, I'm gonna do this full day session with Todd, and I said, well, I'm gonna go. Like, I'm gonna be there. If we're paying this much money, let's try and get as much value as we can out of it. So that's when I started working more with Todd and really realizing the brilliance of what he does, because so we had that great full day session with him where we broke apart our businesses, and he just gave me some brilliant advice about different things. But then also we were a part of a mastermind, and we invited Todd as a guest to come, and I watched him in a room with 10 other business owners, and just everyone with like their jaw dropped listening to him give this feedback and advice and teach some of the frameworks that he teaches. And I just kept thinking, like, this has to be this is something for the masses. Like he had kept, he was working with just these very elite people. And I just kept thinking about, like, yes, what he's teaching works at a very sophisticated high level, but it also is so applicable if you're just trying to get an idea off the ground. So it was at that mastermind, we were in Kiowa, South Carolina, that I pulled him aside and I said, have you ever thought about making like an online program, something like that? And we created the idea for the 90-day year.
Yeah.
I mean, he already had a framework of 90-day year that he had taught before.
Right.
But we sat down and we decided to do a launch, like a beta launch of this product to just my audience. This was 2 years ago now. And that's where the whole 90-day year, the first thing was born. I can't take credit for it because it was Todd's original idea.
Right.
But I will take credit for the fact that, like, I kind of said, we have to do this and get this out there.
That's
and
awesome.
then made him come in my apartment for like 3 days and film all the videos and do everything.
I watched a lot of those, and they were brilliant. I was just like, wow, he's playing on a different level.
Yeah, very smart guy.
So as we wrap up, one thing I think is interesting is that you've been doing this basically your whole life. I mean, since college, you've been an entrepreneur. So looking back, what would you say was the worst part of it and the best part of entrepreneurship?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. The worst part of it, the worst part of it, just my gut reaction, is the people that you lose. So we talked a little bit earlier that becoming an entrepreneur and just this 10-year journey has turned me into the woman that I've always wanted to become. That being said, there's a lot of growth and a lot of change that happens on that journey, and for valid reasons, for reasons that aren't valid, a lot of times that will cause friction in your life with family, friends, loved ones. And I've had a lot of friends that have, like my life now, who I am now, my interests, everything, almost not everything, but a lot about me is very different. And some people do not like to see other people change. Some people don't like to see other people grow because of their own insecurities or their own just issues with their lives or who they are. So I've lost some very dear friends because of how much I've changed and how much my life has changed. That's been the worst part. But I'd say that's also been the best part. I can give you kind of a cheeky answer. It's just how much entrepreneurship has not changed my job or just my income, but it has changed my entire life. It has changed who I am. And the impact I've been able to have, the life that I'm able to enjoy is so far above and beyond what I'd ever even expected for myself.
Awesome. Now this is a really practical question, so give yourself a minute if you want to think on the answer, but you probably will just bust it out. But so for you guys, the turning point was you spent a couple $100 on SEO, which like 11 years ago, that's kind of cutting edge. So today, you're sitting with an entrepreneur and they have a couple $100. They're in debt because you guys were in debt at that point. You were about to give up.
Yeah.
So they're like, this is the end. I have a few $100. What should they spend it on?
Okay, so that is a really hard question because it depends on
The business.
and what specifically would be the biggest.
You kind of come up with a scenario maybe. Maybe we should focus on physical products since that's something.
I honestly, my gut answer would be Facebook ads, which is kind of funny because you can waste $100 very, very easily with Facebook ads. But if you know how to, if you take the right course, if you find the right person, if you know the right expert that can actually show you how to use the ads properly, I think that's one of the best ways to grow a business at any stage, because I think it's a great way to test. If you can get cold traffic to convert, if you can get total strangers to buy whatever you're selling, then you have a proven concept.
Yeah.
So it's a lot easier to go to friends and family and try and sell something, or even reach out to your existing audience. Like, it's a lot easier for me to email my list and try and sell them something than to do a Facebook ad to totally cold traffic and try and sell something. So I think that it's a really great, if you can get cold traffic to convert on an offer.
Okay, so that was a great, practical, very tactical answer. So maybe let's, there are a lot of people watching, people who love you, who love your online, you have so much informational products online and stuff, would love to pick your brain. So let's talk specifically for someone with maybe an Etsy shop or a handmade product or something, physical goods. If you could give them one piece of advice, entrepreneurial advice, what would it be?
Stop trying to create so many different SKUs or products and focus on creating one exceptional offering. And when I say exceptional offering, I'm going to speak specifically and very truthfully to a lot of the Etsy and the creators out there, because a lot of times I see people in that particular field, and I can be guilty of this myself as well, that create for themselves. And creating for yourself is a beautiful thing. If you have art that you want to create or some sort of crafts good, but if you have a business, you're creating for a consumer. So I think it's wonderful to have a hobby and to paint, but if you can't just turn your hobby into a business because you want to make money doing what you love. There needs to actually be a desire for what you are creating. And that circles back to the advice I would give. So focus on one particular thing that there is actually a need in the market for that you can create and make it remarkable. So don't try and create a line of 10 different things off of one idea you have, but focus on one thing that you know you do really well, whether it's your most popular product or something that you get a lot of requests for, and just try and do that as great as you can, be known for that. And once you kind of put your flag in the sand there, then you can do more spin-offs and things. But I see a lot of people just becoming very, sadly, but mediocre, because they're trying to create this big mega online store and they haven't really been distinctly identified as a certain purveyor of something.
Yeah. Okay, now the other side is your giant personal brand. I mean, Melanie Duncan is a really recognizable, strong brand. So for someone trying to build a platform, maybe they're an author, a speaker, they want to do informational products, they want to have, they want to go speak at conferences. What's your number one piece of advice for them?
It's harder than you think. So I had a really rude awakening when I shifted from selling physical products like pillows or sweatshirts to an online brand. And there was a bunch of different reasons for that. But I did not realize there's a big difference between getting someone to buy a pillow because it's pretty versus getting someone to truly know, like, and trust you so they want to not only listen to, but pay for your advice.
Right.
That's so much harder than like taking a great picture and doing a good product description for something physical. So if you are a personal brand, you have to figure out, and this actually, it's very similar to the Etsy advice, you have to figure out, like, what's your hook? And your hook is your benefit. what is your benefit to your audience? I heard someone say one time, I always think the term brand is so crazy now because it just means a million different things.
Yeah.
And someone said your brand is your promise. Your brand is what you give people, what you promise to deliver for them. And I think if you're a personal brand, you have to think of that. Like, what is your promise? What do people come to you for that you deliver on? Because, you know, you don't want to just be blah, and you're not going to be for everyone. But, you know, what do you want to stand for? What do you want to deliver to your audience? And how can you really fulfill on that?
Amazing answers. Isn't she awesome? This is why she has 3 7-figure businesses, okay? Thank you so much. We're going to be right back with Melanie and Fast Facts.
There is a lot we can learn from Melanie Duncan, but here are my top few keys to success for the rest of us from my interview with her. Number 1, start as simple as possible. Remember, you want to start with the minimum viable product. They started with customized sweatshirts, just embroidery items, just for Greek students. So as she said, think about one product that you can make really well and be a standout rather than creating a whole line of products. Number 2, let your ideas evolve. There were lots of things that they tried along the way. They were going to trade shows. They tried to do tourist apparel. There were lots of things that they did that led them to where they are today. So they kept exploring things within their niche. Number 3, assign clear responsibilities. She said if there's not a clear responsibility and everyone's working on everything together, then no one's really working on anything very well. So whether you're working with your spouse or significant other or maybe a family member or even just with your team, make sure you've assigned clear responsibilities. Number 4, balance seasonality. It's really hard to have a successful business that's only thriving parts of the year. They decided to launch a monogrammed gift line that would be popular for weddings and baby showers, which was in the summer, the opposite of the fall and winter months when they were doing a lot of Greek apparel. So think about how you can balance out your business throughout the year. Number 5, use your existing connections. When she tried to get her product featured on morning shows and magazines, no one would take her call, so instead she used the network of lifestyle bloggers that she already had. That grew organically, and eventually she got her goal. So use your existing network, which leads me to number 6, find a network. Find a community. She talked about how the growth of entrepreneurship and how much your life changes, that you lose some relationships. And it's important that you have new relationships in their place. Plus, the way that she networked when she moved to New York City ended up with new business partners and helping Todd Herman launch his entire online platform. So work to find and foster a like-minded community of support for yourself. And lastly, design your life. I think this is a really interesting point that she touched on that a lot of my guests haven't really said directly, and that is that entrepreneurship allows you to design your whole life however you want it. So embrace entrepreneurship and then really make your own rules as you go and design your life to build around your mission.
All right, we are back for Fast Facts. Are you ready? I'm so ready. Okay, just try and answer as quickly as you can. Okay. Chocolate or vanilla? Chocolate. Scrabble or charades? Charades. Coffee or tea? Tea. What's your Starbucks tea order?
Oh, I normally do their mint tea.
Okay. Early bird or night owl?
Become more of an early bird since Olivia.
Winter or summer?
Summer.
Wine or beer?
Wine.
Pancakes or waffles?
Those are good. Waffles?
Guilty pleasure TV show?
Fixer Upper.
Okay. What's the wallpaper on your cell phone?
A picture of Olivia.
What's the last thing you Googled?
Last thing I Googled is probably when the Super Bowl is.
Okay, would not have expected that.
I can give you the story about that, but
most recent book you read?
most recent book, The Art of Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time. It's on Scrum, project management.
Okay, favorite book?
I love By Invitation Only, which is written by the Guild Group owners.
Oh, okay. What about fiction?
Fiction book. It'd have to be one of those sappy,
Nicholas Sparks?
Not Nicholas Sparks, but like the female authors that write those stories, one of those.
Last person that called or texted you?
I'd have to look, it's probably my dog walker.
Last person or last awkward situation you were in?
Last awkward was with an Uber driver last night.
I can understand that. Last vacation you took?
Was to Italy. Great.
Hobby, if you have one?
I hobby, I mean, I told you I love to throw dinner parties.
And fashion, you're really into fashion, right?
Very into fashion,
I would
very
consider
into,
that a hobby.
interior design.
Favorite snack?
Chocolate covered graham crackers.
This may be the same answer, but if you're going to go crazy and indulge, like in a meal, what would you have?
Quality Italian has really good pasta. Probably some sort of pasta and wine from here.
Favorite cereal?
Honey bunches of oats.
Favorite music right now?
I love the Bel Gilberto, kind of a Spanish guitar type thing.
What is your biggest pet peeve?
Is chewing a pet peeve? I hate the
Yeah.
sound of chewing.
That's a good one. What would your husband say is his biggest pet peeve that you do?
Oh, we should ask him. My biggest pet peeve. He hates when I take a really long time to ask him a question by giving him all of this additional information beforehand that I think he needs to understand the context.
He does. He
But
totally
he
does.
thinks he doesn't need it.
One word you're guilty of saying too often. Like, me too. What were you doing right before this interview?
Feeding Olivia a snack.
And what will you be doing this evening?
Feeding Olivia.
Yeah.
We'll probably go out to dinner.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been really fun and also just like a different perspective. I love hearing your story, and definitely go to melanieduncan.com. Is that your preferred? And she has so many great informational products, and you have a lot of free stuff. People can get a lot of information. So definitely check that out. And thank you again. I'm Kelsey Humphreys here with Melanie Duncan, and this has been The Pursuit.